host. Welcome back to Breaking Barriers, the podcast where we dive deep into the psychology behind movies, books, and real life experiences. Today, we're exploring Good Will Hunting, a film that beautifully captures trauma, defense mechanisms, vulnerability, perfectionism, and personal growth, all wrapped in the story of a young man afraid of his own potential. If it's been a while since you've seen it, here's a quick refresher. The film follows Will Hunting, a 20-year-old from South Boston who's an unrecognized genius. Instead of using his gifts, he works as a janitor and spends his time drinking with his blue-collar friends. When an MIT professor discovers his talent, he's pushed into therapy with Sean Maguire, a psychologist who challenges him to confront his past, break down his walls, and take control of his future. To help us break down the deep psychological themes in this movie, I'm joined by Dr. Elliot Hayes, a psychologist and author of Masking Ourselves, The Psychology of Fear and Growth. Elliot, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good Will Hunting is such a powerful film because it shows how unresolved trauma affects every part of our lives, our relationships, our careers, and even the way we see ourselves.
Exactly. So let's start by talking about defense mechanisms because Will is full of them. Will Hunting is one of the most intelligent characters ever written, but he uses that intelligence as a shield. Instead of allowing people to get close, he hides behind his ability to outsmart them.
That's classic intellectualization, a defense mechanism where someone avoids emotions by focusing on logic and analysis. We see it early on in the bar scene, when a Harvard student tries to embarrass Will's best friend, Chucky.
Will absolutely destroys that guy with historical facts, but instead of using the moment to connect with Skylar, who's clearly interested in him, he turns it into a battle.
Exactly. That's deflection. Instead of letting someone see his true self, he turns interactions into competitions. We see this again in his first therapy session with Sean Maguire.
That's when Will walks in and immediately starts attacking Sean's painting.
Yes, that's projection. Will is uncomfortable with his own emotions, so he shifts the focus onto Sean and tries to pick him apart instead. But Sean doesn't fall for it. He calls Will's bluff and kicks him out. That moment is important because it's the first time someone refuses to play Will's game.
Something I love about this movie is that it's not just about Will's healing journey. Sean is also grieving and processing his own pain.
Absolutely. Sean isn't just a wise therapist who has it all figured out. He is a deeply wounded man who has spent years grieving the loss of his wife. In many ways, he and Will are more alike than Will realizes.
And the moment that really makes that clear is the park bench scene, where Sean finally breaks Will's defenses.
That scene is one of the most iconic moments in film. Up until this point, Will has been dismissing everyone, proving that he's smarter than them. But Sean flips the script. He tells Will, "You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about."
Sean tells Will that he can recite every fact about Michelangelo, but he has never actually experienced love, war, or true loss.
And that's a huge wake-up call for Will. He suddenly realizes that being the smartest guy in the room doesn't mean anything if you haven't truly lived.
One of the biggest ways Will's trauma manifests is in his relationship with Skylar.
Yes, Skylar is the first person in Will's life who genuinely wants to love him, and that terrifies him.
We see this especially in the breakup scene. Skylar asks Will to move to California with her, and instead of even considering it, he completely shuts down.
That's classic fear of intimacy. Will believes that if he lets Skylar in, she'll eventually see his flaws and leave him.
And instead of being honest about his fear, he tells her, "I don't love you."
That moment is heartbreaking because we know he's lying. But for Will, pushing Skylar away is safer than risking getting hurt.
By the end of the film, Will finally leaves Boston. What does that represent?
That's his moment of transformation. Instead of running from love, he chooses to take a risk.
And we know exactly where he's going, to find Skylar.
Yes, that's what makes the ending so beautiful. Will has spent his whole life believing he wasn't worthy of love, But Sean, Skylar, and even Chucky helped him see that he is.
This movie leaves such a deep impact. If someone loved Good Will Hunting and wants to watch more films with similar themes, what would you recommend?
2 great picks. Dead Poets Society, 1989. Another Robin Williams classic. It explores mentorship, self-discovery, and the power of thinking for yourself. If you loved how Sean pushed Will to embrace life, this film will stay with you. Manchester by the Sea. Starring Casey Affleck, this film is a raw and emotional look at grief, guilt, and redemption, much like Will's struggle. It's heartbreaking, but deeply moving.
All right, Elliot, what's the biggest lesson from Good Will Hunting?
Life isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about taking risks, loving deeply, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To everyone listening, don't let fear stop you from living. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go live your story.